This is believed to be one of the greatest wonders of the ancient world. Green trees rising above a city, water flowing high above the ground, a paradise in the middle of dry land. However, the truth may be very different. What if this famous garden never existed at all? In this story, you will explore one of history's most debated mysteries. At the same time, you will learn how to question ideas and understand evidence through clear, simple English. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever believed something just because everyone else did? If this made you think, you can support the channel with a like and subscribe. Today, when people hear about the Hanging Gardens, they imagine beauty. Tall structures covered in plants, water moving through the air, a peaceful place built in a harsh environment. The story feels simple. A powerful king builds a garden for his wife because she misses her homeland, the place where she grew up. It sounds real, and more importantly, it feels human. This is only the surface. When we look closer, the certainty begins to break. There are no clear remains, no confirmed structure, no direct records from that time. This detail forces us to rethink the entire story. To understand this better, we must go back to a very different world. A world where survival mattered more than beauty. Long ago, life was difficult. People lived close to nature, and survival was their main goal. Cities were rare, and they were built near rivers. Water meant life. One of the most important regions was Mesopotamia, a land between two great rivers. In this region, people built early cities and formed powerful empires. Large territories ruled by a single leader. Life was far from comfortable. The land was dry, the heat was intense, nature was difficult to control. From this struggle, a powerful idea emerged. People wanted control over nature. At this point, gardens became more than places with plants. They became symbols of power. A garden showed that a ruler could create life in a dry world. It showed control, strength, and authority. This idea changed how rulers thought. They no longer wanted only survival. They wanted to impress. They wanted to leave a legacy. As empires expanded, rulers began building larger and more complex structures. Alongside these structures, stories began to grow. In ancient cultures, stories often mixed truth with imagination. Over time, these stories became legends. One of the most famous cities of that time was Babylon. It was known for its size, its massive walls, and its powerful ruler, Nebuchadnezzar II. He built impressive structures and expanded his empire. According to later accounts, he built the Hanging Gardens for his wife. It is a powerful image, power, love, and beauty combined in one place. This is where the story begins to weaken. There is no clear Babylonian text that describes these gardens. This detail changes how we understand the entire story. Babylonians recorded many achievements. They wrote about wars, buildings, and major events. So why is there no record of such an extraordinary structure? This question becomes difficult to ignore. Historians, people who study the past using evidence, began to examine the story more carefully. Where are the remains? Where are the detailed descriptions? Why do only later writers mention it? From this point, certainty begins to disappear. Most descriptions of the Hanging Gardens come from Greek writers who lived long after Babylon's time. They described it in detail, yet none of them had ever seen it. They described it clearly, yet they had never seen it with their own eyes. They wrote with confidence, yet they had no direct experience. They were reporting what they had heard. This is second-hand information. And this weakens the reliability of the story, because stories change as they travel. Details can be added, others can be lost. Over time, the original truth becomes unclear. Now consider this carefully. If a story changes again and again, how much of it remains true? This question sits at the center of the mystery. Yet here is the surprising part. Even though the source is uncertain, the descriptions are highly detailed. Writers describe gardens built in levels, with trees growing above the ground and water being lifted upward. This is not easy. In fact, it is extremely difficult, even by modern standards. It requires planning, knowledge, and advanced engineering. So now we face a strange situation. We have detailed descriptions, yet not a single piece of confirmed physical proof. The story is clear. The evidence is missing. And this is where the mystery becomes real. At this point, the narrative takes an unexpected turn. What if the writers were describing something real, but in the wrong place? This possibility changes everything. Some historians now believe the gardens may have existed, but not in Babylon. They point toward a different city, a different empire. The city was Nineveh. It belonged to the Assyrian Empire, one of the most powerful empires of its time. Its ruler was Sennacherib. Unlike the story of Babylon, he left behind detailed records. In his writings, there are descriptions of advanced gardens, carefully designed with flowing water and structured levels. He even described machines capable of lifting water. This detail is critical, because it matches the most unusual part of the Hanging Gardens story. And now a serious question appears. Were the Greek writers describing Babylon, or were they unknowingly describing Nineveh? This possibility cannot be ignored, because it suggests something unexpected. One of the most famous wonders in history may be based on a misunderstanding. We now have clues, but we still do not have certainty. And that is what makes this mystery so powerful. In fact, this is where it becomes more complex. Historians began comparing different sources more carefully. Some described Babylon, others pointed toward Nineveh. Many did not agree. This creates a clear conflict between ideas. Now the question changes. It is no longer just, did the gardens exist? A deeper problem appears. Where did this story come from, and how did it change over time? To understand this, historians depend on evidence. But here, the evidence is incomplete. There are no clear ruins that match the famous description. No confirmed structure rising in levels. No direct record from the time of Nebuchadnezzar II. This missing evidence weakens the traditional story. Archaeologists continued their search. They explored the ruins of Babylon again and again. They were searching for something extraordinary, large and complex. Something that matched the story. But they did not find it. They found impressive structures, but nothing that clearly matched the Hanging Gardens. At this point, the problem becomes impossible to ignore. For centuries, people believed this story, yet not a single confirmed structure has ever been found. This moment separates belief from evidence. But as doubt grows stronger, the focus shifts again. Researchers begin to study Nineveh more closely, and here something unexpected appears. In the ruins of Nineveh, archaeologists discovered advanced water systems, carefully designed networks that could move water across long distances. These systems required planning, skill, and technical knowledge. They were more advanced than many historians expected, and this detail forces us to rethink the story. Because one part of the description stands out clearly. Water was not just flowing, it was lifted upward. This is not simple. It requires engineering, the use of knowledge to build systems and machines. And now there is evidence of such engineering. but not in Babylon, in Nineveh. This contrast is difficult to ignore. At this point, historians begin to reconsider their earlier beliefs. What if the writers were correct about the gardens, but wrong about the location? This idea slowly gains attention, yet not everyone accepts it. For many years, people believed the gardens were in Babylon. This belief became part of education, books, and common knowledge. Changing such a belief is not easy, because once an idea becomes familiar, it begins to feel true. And this reveals something important. History is not only about facts. It is also about what people accept, repeat, and remember. But the investigation continues. Scholars re-examine ancient texts. They review translations carefully, checking each word. And during this process, an important detail appears. Some texts connected to Sennacherib describe a garden as a wonder for all people. This phrase matters, because the Hanging Gardens are also described as a wonder. There is a key difference. The exact name, Hanging Gardens, is not used in these original texts. So where did the name come from? The answer may lie in language itself. The word hanging may not mean what we think today. It may not describe something physically hanging in the air. Instead, it may refer to something built in layers like terraces. If this is true, then the entire image changes. The gardens were not floating. They were structured, rising upward in levels. And this shows how powerful language can be. A small change in meaning can reshape an entire idea. And this is not only a historical issue, it is also a language issue. Because when words are misunderstood, ideas change. And in this case, misunderstanding may have shaped the entire story. But one important question still remains. Even if the gardens existed in Nineveh, why were they connected to Babylon? This leads to a deeper explanation. Babylon was more famous. It was known as a symbol of power, wealth, and greatness. So people may have connected the story to the most famous city they knew. Over time, this connection became stronger. The story was repeated again and again. Slowly, it became accepted as fact. Yet there is still no direct statement that confirms it. This missing confirmation keeps the mystery alive. And this uncertainty is not a weakness. It is a signal. It shows that history is not always fixed. It can change when new evidence appears. It can evolve when ideas are questioned. And this makes the story more complex. It is no longer just about a king and a garden. It is about evidence, interpretation, language, and belief. This leads to a final turning point. The Hanging Gardens may not be a single place. They may be a combination of different stories. Stories from Babylon, stories from Nineveh, stories shaped and changed over time. This idea changes how we understand the past. Because history is not only about what happened, it is also about how people remember what happened. And now, one final question remains. If people believe something for centuries, does it still need to be completely true? Now we reach the final stage of the story. For centuries, people accepted the Hanging Gardens as real. It became part of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. However, this list was not created using modern scientific methods. It was created by travelers and writers who described what impressed them. And this leads to a deeper question. What makes something a wonder? Is it physical proof, or the impact it leaves on people? The Hanging Gardens had a powerful impact. People imagined green life in a dry land, water flowing where it should not exist, a story of effort, care, and beauty. Over time, this image became stronger, because imagination can feel real. When a story is repeated again and again, it becomes part of culture. And once something becomes part of culture, it becomes difficult to question. This is where the meaning begins to shift. Even without clear proof, the story survived. It moved across time, languages, and empires. But in the modern world, the approach to history has changed. Historians now use stricter methods. They test ideas. They compare sources. They search for evidence. And when they examine the Hanging Gardens carefully, a serious issue becomes clear. There is no confirmed location, no direct record, no verified remains. This leads to a careful conclusion. The Hanging Gardens may not have existed in the way we imagined them, yet this does not make the story unimportant. In fact, it makes it more meaningful. Because now, the focus changes. Instead of asking, "Did it exist?" we ask, "Why did people believe it existed?" This reveals something important about human thinking. Humans do not only record reality, they create meaning, and the Hanging Gardens carry powerful meaning. They represent control over nature. They represent beauty in difficulty. They represent hope in a harsh world. This is where symbolism returns. A symbol is not only what we see, it is what it represents. The idea of a garden in dryness suggests something powerful, that humans can create life, even in the hardest conditions. And this idea appears again and again throughout history. Yet there is another side to this story. Stories can hide the truth. When a story becomes popular, it can replace facts. This creates an illusion, something that appears real, but may not be true. And this is where careful thinking becomes essential. We must ask questions. We must examine evidence. We must understand sources. Because without this, it becomes easy to believe something simply because it sounds convincing. Yet stories still have value. They teach us about people, about beliefs, about hopes and fears. They show how humans understand the world. And this leads to the final idea. The Hanging Gardens are not only a historical mystery, they are a lesson in thinking. They teach us to question. They teach us to analyze. They teach us to separate fact from imagination. Yet they also show us something else. Imagination is not useless. Imagination creates culture, and culture shapes how we see the world. This is where everything connects. Ancient people struggled to survive. Empires sought power and legacy. Writers carried stories across time. Historians continue to question and search for truth. And we stand between all of these layers, trying to understand what is real and what is remembered. We do not live in reality alone. We live in stories that shape it. The Hanging Gardens may not exist in the ground, but in human belief, they never disappeared. And sometimes, belief does not follow reality. It replaces it.